Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, and thanks for attending the webinar with my wonderful and gracious guests, Rhonda and Claire. My name is Keith Hausman. I'm the Chief Customer Officer of Globality, and we're here to discuss how both Invesco and Bristol Myers Squibb are using Globality's AI-based technology to improve how they manage enterprise spend. So with that, why don't I ask Claire to introduce herself and give a little background, and then Rhonda, and then we'll get into some good conversation.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I am Clare Cassano. I'm Head of Procurement Strategy and Centre of Excellence at Invesco. So I look after everything from sort of procurement strategy and governance through to our digital enablement and our analytics.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Griscti. I am the Executive Director of Agile Sourcing at Bristol Myers Squibb. I'm responsible for global source to contract as well as our program to rewire procurement.
Thank you both. Well, let me just frame the purpose, and then we'll get into some discussion. At the end of the day, what we really want to just talk about is how you're using agentic AI technology to improve how sourcing is done, the experience people have in doing it, and the benefits as you see it, which may be financial or otherwise in your organization. And we'll get into it. So I'll start with this. When you set about your course to invest in globality and or other technologies, what were the problems you were trying to solve for? And I suppose why did you choose globality? And I'll start with Rhonda just because we'll go back and forth in terms of who goes first and who gets to riff with the other person.
So 2 years ago, we hired a new CPO, Paula Glickenhaus, and she came in with a mission to basically upgrade the procurement systems, processes, and tools. She said we needed to move into the future and she wanted to do it with AI. And at the same time, we had our CEO standing on the stage saying it takes too long. It takes longer to create a purchase order than it does to have a child. And that was true at the time. So it was a little bit amusing, but it was a little bit, I will say, annoying to the procurement organization. We're like, no, we want to be enablers, not not detractors. So at that time, we began a journey to really look at rewiring the entire procurement process and the tools that we were using to make a better user experience and to basically have people stop saying that procurement was a roadblock. So our first step was globality. We were using an antiquated system. I won't say who. It was powerful, but it was complicated, and we were using email instead. So that really wasn't the most efficient way. And it was taking us 6 to 9 months to get through an RFP. So we chose Globality as our first tool for AI because we were able to deploy it fast. The AI would speed up our cycle time and get us to benefits that we could use to invest in other technologies. And that's how
Well,
we
I have one follow-on question for you. When you went through your evaluation process, I remember it was a unique process. It wasn't per se an RFP, but it was like more of a design thinking, immersion,
yeah.
see a bunch of technologies, and get people excited about it and then sort of winnow it down. Why did you choose that process instead of running a traditional RFP?
We wanted to do things different. If we're rewiring procurement and going through the processes that we used in the past weren't working, we decided to open it up to the entire organization. And we basically we went through a market assessment to basically say who's available. And then we brought everybody in and opened it up to the whole company to participate and provide feedback. And from that, we were able to determine what was it that we actually needed to solve our problems. Because we thought we knew, but what we learned along the way was that if we had gone through a traditional pathway, we would have settled for a marginal improvement. But going through it this way, getting the feedback, we had participation and pull from the organization, not just from the procurement team, but from legal and our end users as well, to put in globality and then adopt it. Our adoption has been unprecedented for any tool. We did almost no training, and yet um, it's it's very well used. We're doing 10x the number of RFPs this year as we did pre-launch. So that's unique when you're deploying software. So yeah.
Yeah, that sounds brilliant and creative. Claire, how about you? What problems were you trying to solve, and how did you arrive at Globality?
Yeah, so some similar ones to Rhonda and some differences in our approach. So we too had a new CPO about 2.5 years ago, with a revitalized interest across our organization in procurement and the value that procurement can bring to the organization. So our CPO really set about looking at across the board target operating model, systems, tools, and what was going to make us as the most efficient that we possibly could be, really drive up our spend under management and drive up our savings rates as fast as possible. So we were really kind of going from a bit of a standing start in terms of technology. We had nothing in the way of kind of procurement upstream technologies for sourcing, for intake. Our real intake kind of, or point of intake at Invesco until we introduced all of our new tech stack was the purchase request, which is obviously far too late for us to be able to affect any change. So we took the approach, we looked at endpoint solutions, we looked at big box suites, we went through full RFP as we were determining what was going to be the right fit for us. We did have some existing technologies for third-party supplier risk and obviously Oracle for our ERP and for our requisitioning, and I was told not to touch those two things because they were working and they were working well. So we were looking for sourcing capability, intake capability, and contract management and lifecycle management capability, and we landed on kind of best fit endpoint solutions that we could orchestrate together to build kind of a gold standard user experience. So in terms of Globality and why Globality, I think at the point that we were reviewing what was available, there was nothing really that compared to Globality in terms of the ability for us to be able to create that force multiplier effect. So whilst we were getting investment as a procurement team, we know that that investment isn't forever. And we also knew that we couldn't kind of add loads and loads of new headcount to start covering some of the spend that we hadn't had access to before. We really needed to find a technology solution that was going to enable us to do more with what we had in terms of our resource capacity. And the capability of Globality, the AI guided kind of build of RFP, RFX was what really attracted us to it at that point in time.
I love the force multiplier term. It's a good way of thinking about, how do you create value while you're implementing the whole strategy, which oftentimes can be quite complicated and perhaps lengthy. Why don't we talk a little bit about implementation? I know more than a handful of procurement people that have implemented procurement software and kind of walked away with some trauma and scars. And starting with you, Claire, how has the implementation been, not only of Globality, but the rest of the tech stack? And then we'll go back to Rhonda in terms of how that's worked and the experience you've had with it.
Yeah, well, the first thing that I would say is, you're told by technology organizations that the implementation period is X number of weeks, and it never turns out to be. With Globality, arguably it was. We were implementing 3 solutions all at once, and we were integrating our intake and orchestration layer with 5 solutions in total. So we had quite a lot to be planning for and preparing for. But I think the best decision that we made early in the process was that whilst we wanted to integrate Globality with our orchestration layer, we were actually able to turn it on far faster and have it operating as standalone. So we've launched Globality to our internal procurement team with plans in the future to roll it out for self-serve, which I can talk about later. But we were able to launch Globality really quickly. It literally was weeks from a standing start, no sourcing solution at all, to having our sourcing solution available. The implementation was fast, the support was really quick and available kind of throughout the duration and beyond. We were able to get Globality live and then make tweaks to it afterwards. So we run a huge number of renewals at Invesco, which a lot of organizations, of course, do. And I think when you think about sourcing tools, you think about them in terms of RFPs, reverse auctions, all of those sorts of things. We wanted to run all of our negotiations for our sole supplier purchases and renewals through Globality too. So we made some tweaks to it once we'd launched. to kind of improve the cycle time for renewals. So implementation was, in short, fast, efficient, and once implementation was over, there was no kind of walk away from the Globality team to say, well, implementation's done and you're on your own now. We've actually been continuing to kind of enhance what we have with Globality since we launched.
Yeah. How about you, Rhonda?
So our experience was very similar. We're rewiring end to end. So we're replacing our entire tech stack all the way through to the Ariba system for POs. Everything before that is fair game. So we have about 7 systems that are going live this year or have gone live this year. So Globality was the first. And we did that in weeks, not months. It was simple. We chose to do it as a standalone back in November, a year ago this week. And we put it in live for the procurement organization to learn how to do it. And then on Valentine's Day, we gave it to the broader organization. And so since that time, the adoption has been fast. We've tweaked the system. We've continued to learn and evolve as we go. And our next step is integrating into the orchestration layer. But we also wanted to start with just driving more competitive bidding within our organization, driving up that process so that we could contribute value to the organization. And our end goal is to have this to be a self-service tool available to the organization. We've given it to the site procurement organizations, and now that our orchestration layer is live, as we build our buying channels out, we see this as an avenue as well.
Great. Now, I think I know it varies from one company to the next, but there's always this notion of what's the business case? What's the business value? Is it more spend being sourced and therefore more savings? Is it cycle time reduction? Is it doing more with less and things of that nature? And when you think about sort of what specific company value you were trying to achieve, how did you set the framework for making the investment and deploying it and then measuring it as it went along?
So we're trying to do all of them at the same time, quite frankly, but it started with the user experience. It was very painful to do an RFP process. It was 6 to 9 months, and we're down to 27 days. So that's huge. So we're able to do more, but at the same time, we're able to do more with less because this work was being outsourced to a third party, and it was not efficient. They were using a different set of tools, didn't work. So we've brought it in-house with less people, 50% less people, and we're doing it, 5 months faster than they were able to do it. So we're also getting the ROI. I think the numbers that you and I talked about, you said, we're going to hit this number, this percentage of increased savings, and we've exceeded that target this year. We originally had very low expectations. We wanted to get maybe 100 million through the tool because we weren't doing competitive bidding. And as of last week, the numbers look like we're over $1 billion through the tool in just these 10 months. So for me, we're meeting the goals and objectives in terms of delivery. We're freeing up capital so that we can invest in other tools. We're using fewer resources to get higher level value and providing a better user experience. So the business case, we didn't do it the way normal people would. We self-funded by spending less with third parties in exchange for using that money to buy our tools. So as long as we keep with our theme of increased user experience and spending less money on our third parties, we're exceeding our objectives.
Amazing. How about at Invesco, Claire?
Yeah, well, we were certainly tasked with bringing down our operating costs, driving up spend under management, introducing guardrails that had never really been there before, ensuring that procurement had line of sight to purchases that the business were making. So we were trying to do all of those things that you listed, Keith, kind of all at once. In terms of, so our business case set out exactly that. It was also, of course, when you're adding guardrails to purchases, you know, we've all worked in procurement for a while. Procurement can sometimes be seen as the blocker from being able to get the business getting stuff done, and we wanted to not create that experience. So while we were adding controls and we were adding kind of time almost or pre-checks to some of the purchases before they made it to purchase request, we wanted to ensure that we were giving our users a really positive experience. We had, just to give you a flavour of that, we had an inbox in the procurement team that used to receive about 12,000 emails a year. And of those emails, about 80% of them were just messages between members of the procurement team trying to get processes through, because our intake was obviously either at the purchase request, or it was at the point where somebody was raising a new supplier request, or it was a Teams message to somebody in the team to say, hey, I need some help. So we needed to create that kind of single front door for users to come through, and then ensure that we had all of the tools and the capability behind the scenes of that single front door to then make that process as efficient as possible, which is of course where kind of Globality and our CLM come in. We're able to move requests straight from intake through into Globality, issue out RFPs, issue out notifications to our suppliers to renew, and manage all of that through Globality, and manage more of that through Globality before it then comes back through the remainder of the process to create PR. In terms of kind of scores on the door, as it were, obviously part of our business case identified where we expected our spend under management to be, where we expected our savings rate to be. We have implemented 3 new solutions. We've integrated 5 solutions in total. We've made some changes to the way that the procurement team work, and that was all part of the original business case. So the outcomes are across all of those things, including our implementation of Globality. But we have outstripped our target by some way. So we've delivered 2.5 times the level of savings this year than we did versus our baseline. And bearing in mind that Globality was one of the first solutions that we launched, and intake has come a little bit, you know, we implemented intake a little bit later. You know, a lot can be kind of credited to the fact that we're able to put some of these purchases through Globality and do more with the resource capacity that we have available. So yes, we have by far outstripped even our own kind of targets, which has been really positive.
One of the things that I've heard more than a handful of times from companies is who are, you know, considering similar goals and objectives that you all had is, well, I have to do, you know, I have to implement orchestration first for the rest of the ecosystem to do what it needs to do. And it seems to me both of you would agree that there's several things you have to do to create the total package, but neither of you really sort of thought about it as I have to do that first before I can do anything else. How would you respond to that, Claire?
Well, I'd say we've kind of proven that out almost. I think, look, anything that you're trying to change in the procurement cycle, there is always something that you could have changed in the previous step that would have made the change in this step easier. But I think for sourcing particularly, and for Globality particularly, if you are containing that certainly to your procurement team in the first instance, there's absolutely no reason why that can't launch before intake. And actually, there are some benefits to launching it before intake, because you start to understand, particularly if you're in the position that we were in, which we were putting lots of new systems and technologies in at the same time. And there is some crossover between what Globality can do versus what the intake tool can do versus what the CLM tool can do. You have to make decisions about where you are going to do some of those tasks, and therefore what data and data points you're going to be transferring from intake into sourcing, sourcing back to intake, and so on and so forth. So actually it makes sense it made sense certainly for us to have Globality go first, because then we were able to really understand how we were using Globality, the data that we wanted to come across from intake to load into Globality, and the data that we wanted to then extract back out of Globality in order for the remainder of the process to work. So that was our approach to it.
Yeah. How about you, Rhonda?
I think we followed Claire's approach pretty much. We implemented Globality first because it was the first AI tool to get the team upskilled on AI and to get them familiar with the new ways of working, but also to help us make decisions. So we were told by multiple people that we had to get our data right. We had to layer in our orchestration first. And we went about this to say, no, we have to go through the processes that we have and the pillars of the various procurement steps and look at how those work, where they're broken, and what we want them to do in the future through that process. And we chose Globality first because it had an impact out in the organization, but it also had an impact within the procurement organization in terms of elevating the skill sets of the team to be able to work with the AI tools in a very easy way that got them excited about the rest of the changes that were coming. It gave them the opportunity to provide insights on what we needed to pull through in terms of our intake and orchestration, what we needed to plug in, what data we needed to use. And it gave us new ideas on how we actually wanted to use the tool at the end of the day. We started with a simple, oh, we just need to run more RFPs. And then we became like, what about taking it all the way through to the SOW? What about using the autonomous negotiations? What if? And we went through that scenario of learning and growing and expanding our minds as well with the Globality team before we plugged in to our orchestration layer. And that gave us a lot of time to think it through so that the integration was seamless and the impact on the user experience was elevated at go live versus like a little bit of like an iPhone. We put out orchestration, we gave it continuous enhancements that made the user experience better over and over. So we were always giving them something. And Globality was a big give. They viewed that
Yeah.
as a win.
Yeah. A couple more things just to be sensitive to time. I think the three of us have been at various conferences that are out there, whether that be DPW or procurement leaders over the last year and more. And there's a talk track around AI that is part excitement and part fear and and part wonderment and different things that are going on. But the thing that always comes out to me is procurement leaders saying to themselves, I'd really like to make my function more embedded in the business, more business partnering, less about being the jockey of the process, if you will. Are you seeing that start to play out in your companies as a result of what you're doing with Globality and other technologies?
Yes, in multiple ways. So as we're creating efficiencies and we're implementing AI and people are seeing the impact of what we're doing, they're reaching out to us to say, how do we rewire our processes as well? And how do we elevate our game within our business function? So it isn't solely about procurement providing standard procurement services. We're becoming the internal consultant on rewiring your organization to make it more effective for the current world. We're also showing them how to integrate the human in the loop into these processes because going forward, the most successful people in the procurement organization will be those who are able to harness the AI for good, right? So I see multiple agents and multiple AI tools coming to the forefront, and you as a procurement person working with the business to get the needs and then harnessing the power of the technology to deliver. So people who jump in and use AI as a partner versus fear it or think of it as replacing them will be at an advantage. And you'll be helping your business partners because they're going to be asking for new ways of thinking. And they're going to see that we've been here first, and they're going to ask us to do more than procurement, but provide strategy consultant on their creation of their strategies, but also on the execution.
I
That's
think
what
it's
we're seeing.
awesome. I think it's awesome to see procurement being first with some of these things.
Yeah.
Anything different for you at Invesco, Claire?
Look, I think for us, there's lots to talk about AI everywhere, and there's lots of kind of we need AI. It has to have purpose, and I think the benefit of some of the AI that we have implemented over the course of the last 2 years has been it has a very clear purpose, whether it's a glow within Globality that helps guide the team through creation of sourcing events and analysis, or whether it's some of the AI that we're using on our contracts to be able to kind of highlight where maybe supplier paper doesn't really match up with our terms, or it has purpose. What I think is really exciting is, as we build our confidence, and to Rhonda's point, it's those people that are the kind of AI natives or getting used to operating with AI that are really going to be kind of pushing ahead. I think as we get more confident with the use of AI and start thinking about the use of agents and those linking of agents, you can start thinking about how you can use your procurement data across the enterprise, right? Everything and anything that starts with a purchase that then ultimately ends up, I think about things like asset management and all of those sorts of things that tend to be linked, but not as intrinsically as they really should be. How can we be using agents moving forwards across the entire life cycle of the things and the goods and services that we purchase? That's the stuff that's really exciting to me.
Yeah. You both have mentioned self-serve and sort of a word that I use a lot, which is how could we democratize certain parts of the source to contract process, or any process really within procurement. And as we think about the next 12 to 18 months, tell me a little bit more about kind of where you see it going next, and how holistically you'll be able to manage spend thinking about it that way.
Well, pragmatically for us, we talked earlier about Globality going first and our ability to kind of then implement intake afterwards. I think the thing that you potentially need intake for is for that self-service, or moving your end users into being able to self-serve in a tool like Globality. Our intent is to ultimately do that, is to roll Globality out to the business, for particular categories, for particular spend thresholds, always with procurement with oversight of all of that happening. But the intent therefore is that we can build all of our kind of controls and checks and balances through the intake processes, and those individuals that we want to guide to Globality, we therefore can, for them to self-serve through the tool, and essentially run their own RFPs. So that's our plan for self-serve as it pertains to Globality at Invesco.
I think we're on the same journey, because that's our plan as well. We're using the intake and the orchestration layer to define the guardrails to drive the right people with purchases for the right categories into Globality to self-serve. And I think that's where the guardrails need to lie. We're also looking at early adopters and teams that do a lot of shadow procurement work as a first place to drive those categories in as well.
Yeah. Last thing, I think I can imagine, just by the way you've sort of framed your approaches and successes, how you might think about this. But if you had to think about one thing that you would tell somebody who's starting the journey or thinking about the journey or framing, how to get going with the journey, what's one thing that you would tell them as advice to be successful?
Just get started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose Claire,
Words
same
right out of
thing,
my
but
mouth, Rhonda. Yeah.
Just do it, right?
Yeah.
yeah, just we're stealing from Nike there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny because we're all in many conversations with people who are pondering and thinking and planning, and I think the more you ponder, the further behind you get. So I like the idea of getting on with it. But in any case, it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate your perspectives. I'm sure everyone in the audience does as well. And I hope we'll have an opportunity to talk about it again as we go forward.
Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.